Welcome to part 2 of my interview with Peter Linz.
So internship for 3 months, then museum docent for 6 months. And that led into the tour. And the tour came back, and I might be getting ahead of your questions here, but the tour came back, and there were auditions for the resident puppeteers. And to me at the time, the resident puppeteers were like, whoa, because those guys are on the main stage at the Center for Puppetry Arts, and they do at the time 3 shows a year. And I auditioned and got Wilbur in Charlotte's Web. I was so thrilled. But that was around the same time that I had been on the side auditioning for Muppets and attending workshops, and I got invited to New York, kind of right in the middle of the Charlotte's Web rehearsals. I mean, it wasn't just out of the blue. The year before, when I was, I guess when I was working at the museum, it was the first time that the Muppets were going to be sold to Disney, and they were having auditions in the South. I think they had them in Orlando and in Atlanta to try to find people that could maybe have the skill set to be able to do this. And they were going to, Muppets they were going to be, I guess, shooting things down in Orlando. So I auditioned for Steve Whitmire and Kevin Clash at the Center. And after that audition, I got invited to a 5-day workshop down in Orlando with Kevin and Steve. And and that's where I had my first really, crash course in television puppetry. And I asked Kevin I said, I really want to be able to do this. What should I do? And he gave me an answer that I've given many, many times in the years since then. And that was get a camera and a monitor and a puppet that you can lip sync with and it's good eye focus, and practice all the skills we talked about, so that the next time one of these workshop things comes along, you'll be that much better and that much more likely maybe to land something. So the following year is when I went on tour, and I had a camera and some puppets with me, and every hotel I would plug my camera. It was one of these huge RCA camcorders, the full-size VHS cassette tapes, and I would plug it into the hotel TVs, and I would just practice what we learned. Mm-hmm. And so the following summer, when the tour was over, and this was around the time I was auditioning for Charlotte's Web to be a resident puppeteer, the very first O'Neill Puppetry Conference happened, and so I attended that and got invited to come up. Now we're back to boy, this is chronologically really screwed up.
That's okay.
Yeah, I got invited to come to New York to audition for Sesame Street, and the audition kept getting pushed, and it ran right into Charlotte's Web rehearsals. Mm. And so, I mean, ultimately, I had to make a decision between taking a chance on New York and being recast in Charlotte's Web. Right. And actually, the wonderful performer Bobby Box was there at the time, and we made this deal, and to the credit of the center, they signed off on this crazy idea, and that was Bobby filled in for me for the first week of rehearsal, and I forfeited my pay. He got my pay, and the idea was that if I stay in New York, then they're covered. They have someone for Charlotte's Web. Mm-hmm. If I don't get the gig and I come back to Georgia, Bobby can catch me up on everything I missed, and no harm, no foul, and he was okay with that. So was really, really lucky and very, very grateful to him all these years later.
And so then you were working on Sesame Street after that?
Well, I was working on Sesame Street. I would get, and this was back when Sesame Street was shooting like 6 or 7 months out of the year, as opposed to just a few weeks, which is what it is now. And Kevin would bring me in for a day or two on a given week, and then maybe 2 or 3 weeks would go by, and then he'd bring me in again for another day or two. And so I was doing a lot of commuting back and forth between New York and Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I was driving. I did a lot of driving, and then I managed to save up a little bit of money and took a train a couple of times, and then flew a couple of times. And then Pam Arciero, one of the Muppet performers who I met at that first O'Neill conference, let me stay in her place. Actually, that was that was that year. I subleased her city apartment, and also my my brother-in-law's father had an apartment in the city, and sometimes I'd stay there. And Alison Mork was living in the city, and I crashed on her couch a couple of times. So just starving puppeteer living that first season on Sesame Street. So, and it wasn't a sure thing either. After the show wrapped, that was it, and I had no idea if I'd ever be back. And I went back to Atlanta, and picked up working at this men's formal wear shop where I'd worked throughout high school and college, not knowing if they'd ever have me back. And a few months later, I got the call. It's like, okay, the schedule's coming out for season 24. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm going back. That's good news.
How long have you been working on Sesame Street?
I've been on Sesame a long time. I started when I was 12. Well, let's see. Well, we just shot season 47. I think I'm going to say 26 years. No, 25 years on Sesame. But that's not, I wasn't a guaranteed season performer every year. I have been for the past few years, and I was a regular early on. There were years in between when I was working on Bear in the Big Blue House and Book of Pooh and Big Big World. Other things that conflicted with the regular Sesame season, but I always managed to get at least one or two shows, even during those years that I wasn't a regular. So I counted as 25 years on Sesame.
Okay. Cool.
Because it sounds better.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. But and even in those years I wasn't a regular, I was teaching for Sesame. They would send me off to teach the puppeteers of foreign co-productions of Sesame. So I was in China and a bunch of times in Germany and Mexico, once in Hong Kong. Yeah.
How did you get on Bear in the Big Blue House? Like every show it was an audition process. Okay. I had heard that Henson had a new show, and I don't remember if I was invited to. I think I was invited to audition. I think they asked, people if they wanted to come read, and so I did. And at the time, I'd had a couple of few seasons of Sesame under my belt, a couple of seasons of Puzzle Place, and that's how they knew.
So I had some experience. Well, yeah, I was already in. I was kind of already in the gang. Right. Yeah, and I got to do the pilot. And actually, Tutter wasn't called Tutter. Tutter was just simply called Mouse, and he was a she, so it was a girl mouse. And in the pilot, he had a really thick New York accent. Oh, sorry, she had a thick New York accent.
Okay.
They turned Mouse into Tutter, and from a girl mouse to a boy mouse, and lost a lot of the accent.
Okay.
It's a Big Big World.
Yeah, that one.
It's a Big Big World. Yeah. That was the show that took me off Broadway, because I was part of the original company for Avenue Q. In 2003, summer of 2003, when Avenue Q was moving from the Vineyard to the Golden Theater on Broadway. They had their cast, but they needed additional people to cover all their lead roles, and also needed people to be in the ensemble. And so I did both of those things. So I was in the original Broadway cast of Avenue Q for 2 years, and I covered all the men. So I covered the Princeton Rod track, the Nicky Trekkie track, and even Brian, who's a human in the show. Okay,
cool. So then you did.
Then it's a Big Big World.
Okay.
Yeah, that was this guy. Hang on, sorry. Just wait.
Yeah.
That's this guy.
Oh, that guy. He's cool.
Or this guy.
And he was a suit character.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This was inside of him.
Yeah, that's right. Very similar to Big Bird, except that because the show was shot on green screen, I can't remember. You could have a second performer completely dressed in the same color as the background and sneak into the right hand. So he was a suit puppet, a body puppet, but fully articulated, which was really cool. You could do some neat things, which was great because I'd never really done a lot of body puppet work before, and it was terrific to have all that
to get that experience.
Mhm.
So now it's just, I don't know, it's just another tool for my toolbox, I guess. Although my favorite is just basically just the little expressive sock puppets. And by sock puppets, I mean like Walter, a little squishy head, or Tutter, who also had a little squishy head.
Yeah.
I just love the expression that you can get just with changing the shape of your hand just ever so slightly. These are my sorry, going back in time. These are my Puzzle Place characters, Sky and Nuzzle.
Puzzle Place. And then where did Puzzle Place fall in that timeline?
Puzzle was early. Puzzle was like early 90s, early to mid 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, that was actually, it was my second season of Sesame Street. We wrapped Sesame, and I went right out to California. Actually, it kind of cemented my marriage, because Marlena and I got married, and then we were together for the summer, and then she was teaching 4th grade in Georgia, and I came up and did 6 months on Sesame Street in New York. And then right after Sesame wrapped, I got the Puzzle Place gig, and that was 6 months in LA. So the entire first year of our marriage, we were apart. But the reunions were, I mean, we still saw each other every few weeks. She'd either come see me, or I'd go see her.
Right.
Boy, it locked in the relationship for sure. Not that it wouldn't have been locked in anyway.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And that led into the Muppets, I guess. It was an audition. And by invitation. So they had, Disney had auditions in New York and Los Angeles. And a few weeks, Marlena asked me how I did at the audition. And I said, I blew it. I was horrible. It was terrible. And then a few weeks later, I got a call saying, well, you're one of a few people we'd like to call back. Have you come to LA for a callback audition? And she said, the one thing I can tell you is nobody gave them what they were looking for exactly. But the biggest hint I can give you is that they said if the part were going to a human, they would cast Michael Cera in the role, the actor Michael Cera. So in the lead up to that callback, I just watched everything I could get my hands on that Michael Cera has done, and just really tried to get inside his brain and analyze his acting choices and what he was doing, and just work on an impersonation, basically,
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into the audition like, okay, this character is Michael Cera in any role. So he was kind of quiet, a little nerdy, a little uncomfortable with himself, but very subtle, very, very subtle. Yeah. And actually around the same time, I had just come off of 6 weeks of working with Patrick Bristow. Patrick is an actor, a character actor in LA, and also a brilliant improv teacher. And he was working with, and actually emceeing Puppet Up, or maybe it was called Stuffed and Unstrung at that point, in New York. And once a week, they would have improv classes for just the puppeteers and for New York puppeteers to come and take part. So when the Walter audition happened, I was just coming off of 6 weeks with Patrick Bristow doing improv, and studying all the Michael Cera stuff, and both served me really, really well. And actually, I saw Patrick recently, and was finally, all these years later, and was able to thank him, because I really do give him a lot of credit for directly helping me get that part, because improv was also part of the audition.
Mm. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, so right. So. And then after the callback, I thought I did pretty well. I mean, but you never know. And I think another 2 or 3 weeks went by, and we were visiting. My wife and I were visiting family in Atlanta when I got the phone call. That was a big day. That was kind of a good thing. But you know what? I had no idea what it would be. I mean, I had attended a table read for the movie like a month or two before that. Just because they needed some more voices. It had nothing to do with, there was no job in it. It's just like, can you be at the table read? Sure. So I had heard an early version of the script, and I had heard Walter, but it wasn't what it became. All I knew was like, oh my gosh, I got a character in a movie. That's really exciting. And I had no idea that it would become, his story,
Mm-hmm.
be one of the leading things of the film, because it wasn't at that point, the script was not there yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's probably just as well I didn't know that. And then when we were actually shooting the movie, Bill Beretta was so helpful. He was just just kind of held my hand through helping me really lock in Walter's character. And it was actually Bill's idea to have Walter be my own speaking voice, as opposed to trying to imitate Michael Cera, because the puppet looks young. I apparently sound young, and we're worried that if he talked like this, he would sound like a little kid. So we tried reading a couple of scenes, just me reading as me, which was really hard because I'm used to like hiding behind a character voice, like no, take me. I totally skipped between the lions. Where's Theo's up there somewhere?
Oh yeah.
I don't even see him. Anyway, so it was really tough to try to find a character in my own natural speaking voice.
Yeah.
I think that would be easy. I think for intelligent people, it probably would be easy. It was not easy for me.
For intelligent
character. Yeah, we've got to forget all about Between the Lions. I don't.
Yeah.
Where the heck does that fall?
I don't know.
That's sometime in the 90s and early 2000s as
I
well.
do remember that one.
Between the Lions spans, I think, 10 years. That was also happening throughout there.
You said that you went on.
Well, I talked about the international stuff. I didn't talk about Beyond the Sock, where you and I met.
Yes, and I did want to talk about that, but I didn't know where to put it in.
Well, they are very white. Sorry.
What?
Questions. Go ahead.
Yes, I have questions for you.
Okay.
Stop talking. Okay. Let's see.
Thank you. Check the description below for more information and videos and cool stuff.